Okay. Zdravo, dobar dan, dame i gospodo, ja sam Sanjin Dedić. Nastavak ove prezentacije će da bude na engleskom, zato što ja nisam tehnički razgovor, prezentaciju na našem jeziku. Okay. So, hello and welcome. This is going to be a presentation on artificial intelligence and chatbots. My name is Sanjin. I am a digital technologies educator in Australia. I was originally working as a robotics engineer, so that was my start. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about the history of this. This is something that I have developed, a unit for high school students, and I did a presentation at a conference about 2 years ago. And then I was commissioned by an organization called the Digital Technologies Hub. So that's like the Australian government organization that collates resources for all schools in Australia in this particular subject. And I was asked to write a unit on chatbots for kids in years 7 to 10. So mostly the idea is that this would be outside the regular school curriculum, but kids in schools that are doing better than they should be, this would be like a side hobby project that is well mapped out and genuinely interesting. Okay, so that is the background. Let's begin. So, chatbots. Where does this idea of a chatbot originally come from, and why is it interesting? So the idea of chatbot probably dates back to the times that computers were invented by Alan Turing and the crew at Bletchley Park. So this is during the Second World War, while they're trying to break the Nazi messages. And Turing basically sets out this hypothesis that, okay, we're going to have intelligent computers one day. We'll probably have them at the turn of the century, so not quite come true. But we'll know that the computers are intelligent if you ever get a machine. This was called the imitation game that can pass the imitation game. The imitation game worked as follows. You'd have a person talking via text to another person and a computer. And if the person C cannot tell who is human and who is a computer between A and B, then what we have is an intelligent machine. So this is better known as the Turing test. So on the next slide, I've got a quote from Alan Turing. A computer would deserve to be called intelligent if it could deceive a human into believing that it was human. So how did we do over the last 70 or so years before this vision of computer intelligence, this benchmark got made out by Turing? Well, in 1980, it probably looked like we were doing pretty well. There was a game called Zork. Now, this is before I was born, probably before most of you were born. Zork was based essentially on Dungeons and Dragons, but it was the first advanced text parser that anybody had ever seen. So the idea in Zork is that, like, there would be this computer chatbot that gave you text messages that led you through an underground world of mysterious places containing trolls and I'll show you a little bit of what Zork looks like. You are in an open field west of a big house with a boarded front door. There's a small mailbox here. So at this point, you could write open the mailbox, open mailbox, or see what's inside. So Zork was basically the first chatbot where 150 different inputs would be understood by this machine. And for whatever reason, people found it incredibly compelling. So Zork was the top-selling game in the world for the decade of the 80s. And it basically revolutionized text parsing. However, strangely after that, we didn't do that much with text parsers, and the games were no longer an outlet because most people wanted to play games with graphics. So today, chatbots still do useful things, but it's they're, in my opinion, a lot less romantic and a lot less interesting. You could order a pizza from Domino's using a chatbot. You could describe what's on your pizza. So, like cheddar cheese, or like a crust that's filled in a certain way. Make sure you put some pepperoni or tomatoes. And the order is going to get assembled for you using the text parser. There are similar apps for real estate where you're asked to describe a dream house. Isključite drugo monitor. To describe a dream house. Guys, I am sorry, but there is no, like, my sound. Guys, I am sorry, but there is no, like, my sound. I will turn off mixer. Open volume mixer. Chrome. Okay, off. Can I get a signal from the webinar crew? Is the sound good now? Can you still hear me and no echo? Nedim on LinkedIn. Okay. Just drop a comment if you can hear me. If not, yes. Good. All right. I shall continue. So I was just saying that chatbots in the, that are used actively in the world today are either selling you stuff or essentially helping you get directed to a database more efficiently, either to finding the right page on a particular website or reaching the right person in an organization. They are useful, but it is very, very far from Turing's romantic vision of us conversing with these chatbots. Now, there are some improvements in terms of text-to-speech. A lot of people have one of these devices, either a Google Siri pod in their house or an Amazon Alexa or a Google Assistant. And these guys, they perform very simple function. You can ask them to play a song. They will go to your library, find the song, and play it. You can buy something online. You could do a Google search, and they will give you the top result. However, that's a little bit alarming if you think about searching for something on the internet and only ever looking or getting the top result actually is something that's going to lead us to being a little bit more closed-minded. However, it is really interesting to see the way people react with bots that have believable sounding text-to-speech. Now, I can only stress that you watch this video. I've muted the audio on this, but you could type in this hyperlink, bit.ly ggl assist, and you can watch Google Assistant organize a haircut appointment. And what's interesting is that the person talking to the Google Assistant has no idea that they're talking to a chatbot. In fact, I might just forward to the part of this where they're having the conversation.
So how can I help you? Hi, I'm calling to book a women's haircut for a client. I'm looking for something on May 3rd. Sure, give me 1 second. Sure, what time are you looking for around? At 12 p.m. We do not have a 12 p.m. available. The closest we have to that is a 1:15. Do you have anything between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m.? Depending on what service she would like. What service is she looking for? Just a woman's haircut for now. Okay, we have a 10 o'clock. 10 a.m. is fine. Okay, what's her first name? The first name is Lisa. Okay, perfect. So I will see Lisa at 10 o'clock on May 3rd. Okay, great. Thanks. Great. Have a great day. Bye.
So the way a future could look like is that if you want to meet a friend, that your chatbot is going to talk to their chatbot, they're going to look at your schedules, have a conversation among themselves, and then an entry is going to appear in your diary. So I believe that this is actually quite an interesting application. Especially, I couldn't tell which one was which. Now, one thing that you could do on your own, I'm going to leave these links here for a minute. You could bookmark them. You could actually copy them and put them in the chat. The guys managing the webinar, that would be cool. The two most compelling conversational chatbots are free and open online. There is Mitsuku, which is a rule-based chatbot that won 5 Liebner Prizes. Now, Liebner Prize is a competition where you attempt to set up a Turing test and chatbots get judged on how well they perform. No chatbot, apart from one, which was done in a bit dodgy conditions, has ever made it past 5 minutes talking to a human, and that human believed that they were talking to a chatbot. The only one that made it past 5 minutes pretended to be like a 13-year-old Ukrainian boy for whom English was like a third language. And hence, it purposefully made lots of grammatical mistakes. It didn't make that much sense. And that's one of the reasons it was successful. So the other one, so Mitsuku is a rule-based one done by a guy in the UK, pretty realistic. The other one, though, is even more interesting. Cleverbot has been programmed through essentially a machine learning algorithm that it imitates the interactions it's had with other people. Unfortunately, you can't stop people from being silly when they talk to Cleverbot. So Cleverbot struggles to get really, really good data and to have an algorithm which basically judges good interactions from bad ones. But I mean, when I took the screenshot, it was talking to 43,972 people. I think that Cleverbot is an idea that's like really, really viable. All you got to do is actually pay people to have serious conversations and then also give Cleverbot some meaningful feedback. So those are 2 chatbots that you could talk to. And I often give these to students so that, you know, they get a little bit of inspiration for what they're going to need. You can also get this bit.ly right here. And I find it interesting. That is the 2017 Liebner Prize. So in this bit.ly, you're going to find transcripts of 15 competitive, the top 15 chatbots, and how they talk to the judges, and at which point the judges judge them not to be realistic. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to go through the actual sequence of programs that I take students through. In a full version, this would probably take you about, well, if you were a really good high school student, it would take you about 10 hours. If you're a software engineer, it'd probably take you an hour and a half to go from, you know, writing your first line of code to having a chatbot that has some level of intelligence and sentiment analysis. So this is the unit on Digital Technologies Hub. I'll make sure you guys get a link to that. Actually, I might just paste it into the YouTube chat. Oh, thank you, Benjamin, for pasting those links. So this is the coding a sentimental chatbot in Python. There are 10 tutorials. There's challenges and questions and quizzes along the way. They created some really awesome resources to support these, but I'm going to take you through the actual programs step by step. So if students have done no Python, I play a little bit of a quiz game. I just create 2 variables, an integer and a string, and then I perform a bunch of operations, and the students, when I teach online, it's like it's a Zoom quiz, and the students vote on answers and they try to guess what each is going to produce. And this is a good way to get into it because really a chatbot is just a program that manipulates and parses text information. However, if you want to do anything even a little bit advanced, you're going to need to use some numerical data, some numbers. So this type of manipulation is a fun way to start. So the very first chatbot, by the way, this is called REPL. This is a Python IDE that works in the browser. The very first chatbot is going to create a nickname. So for example, hello, what is your name? If I say Sanjin, I will call you, and it generates this nickname. So if you want to get creative, kids have fun with this, doctor plus name plus the genius For example, we'll add some spaces, and I'll actually put Benjamin here. I'll call you Dr. Benjamin the Genius. So this is like a nice little warm-up. Again, a little bit of string manipulation. Kids come up with their own creative nicknames. That's not too bad. So where I go to with this next, asking a simple question that has a yes or no answer. This is interesting because parsing yes or no initially begins like this. You will actually check if A and S is exactly yes. And when you do that, you'll realize that you're running into some problems. For example, if you type in, well, let's get rid of that lowering. For example, do you like computers? If you write in yes properly with the capital letters, it will not understand you. If you write yes, I do, it will not understand you. So this is where you build up some text manipulation skills. So you could, for example, lowercase the user input, and instead of checking if the answer is precisely something, you could check if a substring is within a string. If you want to expand that at a basic level, you can have a list of affirmative words, and you can check if the user response actually has any of the positive words in that answer. So this is a fun challenge. Generally, I ask students to go and ask someone who's not in class a question, and then if whatever they've answered to that question works well enough for their chatbot, after they're asking 3 or 4 people, then that's a bit of a testing. The next program I build is a game where, well, usually I pick 1 or 2 things. Either you create a number that's 1 to 100, and you're asking the user guess a number 1 to 100, and you tell them too high or too low. That more or less is a good way to start doing some numerical calculations. That is actually a binary search algorithm that exists, and that's one fun number-based chatbot program you could do. But another one is basically a coin toss. Guess a number 1 to 2, and you keep guessing, and the computer does this forever, but it counts your streaks, how many you got right in a row. So I've got a question in which I'm just going to interrupt and answer it. Is Python good language for beginning programmers? It is the best language for beginning programmers. It was actually designed as a glue language to connect different systems written in different languages. So the idea was like the UN thought of Esperanto. They're going to come up with a language that everybody's going to speak. So Python is that essentially for programmers. If you have some experience in programming and you're looking at Python code, chances are you can already make sense of it. Now, chances are it'll probably annoy you in many ways as well, because, for example, you don't declare the type of the variables, the blocks of code are not as clearly defined, you don't have the curly braces, but yeah, it is the easiest to understand and probably the best for beginner programmers. Okay, where was I? Continuing from the number guessing game or the coin tossing game with streaks, we actually, I'll skip this one because it's very similar to the previous one. We use random in a more productive, more interesting way. Remember those chatbots that exist in websites? They don't even pretend to be human. They are directly, systematically directing you to some direction. They're asking the same question in the same way. But people are a bit random. They've got 10 different ways to say hi, 10 different ways to say bye. And yeah, I mean, if you're Bosnian, they got 10,000 different ways to swear at you, and things like that. So this one here creates a list of greetings and prints a random choice of a greeting. And then it uses a concept of polarity, which is, well, I think I best demonstrate this. By the way, anybody watching this and I'll put this in the chat. Link to chatbot. Since I'm actually going to write some code here, anybody watching this can go in, clicking that link, basically putting that in your browser is going to open up my code, and you could have a play with it. So the concept here is we're going to get a computer program to ask you, how are you? And it'll actually ask that in 5 different ways. Instead of your greeting here, well, what's up? So these are the 5 random greetings. You can print any one of them by saying print random dot choice greetings. So every time you run it, it will randomly pick one. Now I picked the same one twice in a row, but every time you run it, it'll pick one. So here's a realistic interaction, at least a tiny little realistic interaction. What we're going to do is, instead of looking for a specific word that's in the user answer, we are going to check the polarity. That means the analysis of the positivity or the negativity of the user language. Now, let me show you how that works. There's a library called TextBlob. Now, TextBlob basically imports functions from NLTK and from a library called Pattern. Pattern is from Eclipse Institute. Basically, that is an institute in Belgium that studies how computers can interact with humans using realistic language. And they've developed this polarity sentiment tester. And the way that it works is it tags every unambiguous adjective. So any adjective, for example, nice, lovely, beautiful, they all have positive polarity. But adjectives that can be used in different ways are all going to be neutral. So anything that's definitely positive or definitely negative has a tag. And the tag has a score between -1 and 1. So let's print out some examples of this. So we're going to get the user answer by basically saying ans equals input. That's how we get the user input. Now we're going to turn that into a blob object. So blob equals the text blob of answer. And here we can print blob. Wait, not in quotation marks. Blob dot polarity. So I'll show you what I mean. How are you? If you say I am doing great, you're going to get a score of 0.8. That's 0.8 out of 1. There is nothing super sophisticated here. It literally has a tag of 0.8 for the word great. So if I just wrote great, that would be 0.8. But you can also do this, not great, -0.4. You could say extremely good, and that's 0.7. You could say not good, that's -0.35. So it has certain prefixes that work, and it studies certain words. Now you might be wondering which words and how this algorithm was trained. What they actually did was imported several million Yelp reviews. So these are restaurant reviews, and they associated, they basically calculated associations between particular words and the number of star ratings of the restaurant review. So after they did that, all they did was manually removed all the nouns and adjectives that can have double, triple meanings. And that's what you're left with. And it's over 80% accurate for restaurant reviews, over 70% accurate for like general text and articles. So what this actually does is you could tell this computer how you're feeling, and it's going to respond in a realistic way, which is really fantastic. You can also, if you'd like a challenge, try to fool it. You know, say something sarcastic. So like, for example, you're describing that you're feeling using all these negative words, but you mean positive, or you're trying to mean positive with negative words or negative with positive words. Sarcasm, irony, it can't quite hack that, but it's a good challenge. Now, once you have the score, it's very easy for it to respond, and I'll show you how, because this is just a floating point variable between -1 and 1. You could write a response. If blob.polarity is greater than 0, print, I am glad that you are doing great. Otherwise, else, sorry to hear that. So, oops. Hi there, how you doing? Oh, I am well. Now see, well is actually a word, since it could mean a well in the ground, you know, where you get water, or it could just mean like, well, what's going on here? I am well is going to be 0.0, and 0.0 is not greater than 0, so he'll say, I'm sorry to hear that. But I mean, if you describe it in any meaningful way, you know, I am having a nice day presenting about chatbots to some people in Bosnia. Nice. Oh, I'm glad that you're doing great. So you could, of course, refine that. You could come up with ranges where you have, you know, positive, negative, neutral, or very positive. So for example, instead of 0, you could say greater than 0.1 to be good. Instead of, you could, for example, say elif. So if this was less than negative 0.1, that would be sorry to hear that. And if you are very neutral, it'll be seems like you're doing okay, right? Seems like you are doing okay. So if we run this and I say something that has no emotional nouns and no adjectives, like tell me about I am a human being on planet Earth, that's going to be 0.0. Wait a second, that'd be negative 0.1. I am a human being on planet Earth. Seems like you're doing okay, because that'd be the 0, 0. Okay, so far, we've set up the probably most interesting feature that you could do with a chatbot with very basic Python coding. It can recognize positive and negative emotions. It can also recognize bias. So if we printed something, print blob.subjectivity, that is a score from 0 to 1 about how emotionally charged your speech is. So the more adjectives, adverbs you use, the more descriptive you are with your language, the more subjective it's considered to be. And the more just plain nouns and then sort of plain language you use, the more objective it is. So you will actually get a score. I might just do subjectivity here. Oops, no, I put it in the wrong spot. And comma. So this is another weird thing you can do with Python. You can, instead of just doing concatenation, you could print a float and a string on the same line as long as you use a comma. Pretty neat. So if you say, I am a human on planet, that is subjectivity 0.01. It's very, very, very objective speech. I am loving everything. Life is fun. That is a much, much, much higher subjectivity score. It went from 0.1 to 0.575. So those are two things that you could easily measure. I mean, that's just a couple lines of code. And where does it all go? So I'll show you a program that's about 90 lines long. So nothing too fancy, where they put together everything they've learned. So they put together the randomness and the nickname program, right? They put together the random greeting and the nickname. They put together this random selection of topics, a random way to ask a question on a topic, and a study of both the polarity, which I've explained, and subjectivity, which I've just explained. So if you put all these things together, using fairly basic coding, you could have an interesting chatbot. So let's have a look at this one. It would be fun if anybody actually volunteers to talk to a chatbot. I know that we are divided by about 15 seconds, but let me know in the chat if anyone's up for that. Hello, human, what's your name? Sanjin, do you have a nickname? No? And then it gives you one. It doubles up the last letter and adds Y to it. And I'll be like, things are good. Glad you're doing well. Computer games. I love computer games. See, that's a very neutral view. What? And you're a bit biased. What do you reckon about football? Go, Željo. That's going to sound very neutral. And you're quite objective, but there you go. How do you feel about AFL? Now, AFL is Australian football. It sucks. It's like watching paint dry. Very neutral, and I'm a bit biased. What do you think about Python? Amazing. Oh, you really love Python, and you're so biased. Okay, so this is commenting on those two things. And this is roughly what, again, most students would produce after about 6-7 lessons. And I'll show you an advanced one that really, this is something that I think is, I really think that this is interesting. So what you could do is, instead of using lists, you could use dictionaries. So you could give the chatbot its own opinion on each of these topics. And the opinion of the chatbot would be a score from -1 to 1. So, link to chatbot not working. All right, I'll send you, there's a link, advanced chatbot. Guys, apologies, you might have to use different browsers. REPL is a semi-experimental software. It's really hard to get anything in the browser that allows you to import all these libraries. So sometimes it doesn't work, but be patient with it. If you check 2-3 browsers, it's gonna work. So let me show you what this guy does. So this chatbot has a bias, okay? So it asks you questions on these random topics, but this time it uses a JSON file to log human opinions and add to them. So it records what everybody it's talked to thought and adds it to an averaged out score. It also, here in this initial, it has a mood, which is a random mood from 3 to 10. And depending on how good its mood is, it's going to greet you in a different way. And depending on how good the mood is at the very end, it is going to say goodbye in a different way. So it has its own mood, it has biases, and the mood will go up or down depending upon how close your opinion it is your opinion on a topic is to his biases. So let's check this out. I think this program has got about 100 lines here and 56 there. So it's not that much more complicated. Hello, human. I'm a happy chatbot. So, okay, he starts off in a good mood. What is your name? Sanjin. Oh, it's you again, Sanjin. So because I've talked to the chatbot before, he's actually remembered my name. There you go. And he has a score associated with me. So basically, if you've left him in a bad mood, he'll remember the mood he was in the last time he met you. So all of a sudden, there's a whole bunch of personality. Do you have a nickname? If I say yes, what is your nickname? It's actually Dobro for Dedić. Howdy, Dobro, how are you feeling? Brilliant, mate. Glad you're doing well. What do you think about computer games? Now watch this. His opinion on computer games is mildly, well, solidly positive. If I say oops, what did I do here? If I say I hate computer games, I disagree. Computer games are better than that. Also, most people I know think computer games is rubbish. So all of a sudden, now his mood's gone down. What do you think about computers? Oh, horrible, horrible things. Always crash on you. Oof, you totally hate computers. I disagree. Computers is better than that. Also, most people I know computers are rubbish. What is your take on football? I love it. Very awesome. So that should actually max it out. So now his mood is 3. And he's had enough of my silly opinions, and he goes off. And he says to me, I'm off to watch some paint dry. It will be more interesting than you. Yawn, I gotta go now. So I guess what the whole presentation is about is that, you know, the serious scientific community, as well as companies, have temporarily really let go of trying to make chatbots more human, interesting, and interact with emotion and bias and silliness. So it's a fun project to do, and in Python it doesn't require that much coding skill to create something with a lot of personality. So yeah, that more or less is it for the presentation. You can ask some questions in English or Bosnian. I understand enough questions in Bosnian to be able to answer that. I'm just going to put this resource page on my website as a link. It has a collection of awesome YouTube clips, as well as a link to the programs that we use today, and a link to that sentimental chatbot in Python unit. First step into artificial intelligence programming with Python. Yes, it only really has one element of what's used in artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence without understanding language, without natural language processing, is not very useful. And it uses basic natural language processing to process both the subjectivity of text and the emotionality of text. Any further improvements actually have to get deeper into natural language processing, but really won't go far beyond that. The other thing that I would say is there are a lot of AI classification algorithms that you can use without actually understanding neural networks or understanding AI. And it is very, very easy to port these classification algorithms into Python. There is a website called Machine Learning for Kids, and it has a built-in interface where you can actually train a model with word associations to categorize into one or more categories. And you could build that into a Python chatbot. That's a great question. So far, I don't know that there are any major legal constraints. There's a chatbot called Replica, and Replica's purpose for existence, Replica is like a mental health chatbot. It chats to kids that are depressed and puts them in a good mood. It's like your artificial intelligence friend. Now, if that company gets to operate in every country around the world without getting sued, currently, I don't know that any governments are putting restrictions on it. But I imagine as these chatbots become more prevalent, there will definitely be some restrictions, particularly when it comes to interactions with minors. A spanky. By the way, guys, let me know if the link, the last link worked. Na koji način možemo postaviti pitanje za chatbot? Odakle vuče informacije da nam odgovori? Okay, so you ask it a question. It literally saves your input, your question as a string, and it does parsing. So it looks for words that it knows. And if it doesn't know, it can say something random. I basically designed this chatbot to get around this problem by making sure it's the one asking questions, because if you leave yourself in a situation where you're asking the questions to the chatbot, obviously the complexity of what it has to know of the program, of the database, goes up 2 orders of magnitude. I mean, you're going to need 200 times more sort of code, which is just going to be written responses to particular words or word associations. So, you know, there was an Australian show that inspired me, and there's this guy. He's a you know, a bit of a criminal, and the police knock on his door, and they ask him something, and his response is, "I don't answer questions. I don't answer questions." So yeah, the chatbot asks questions. How hard would it be to code a chatbot for commercial use in Bosnian language? Well, I think you're going to have answer a question with a question. Yeah, that's it. Look, if you take out the sentiment analysis, it's what I've done, right? So the problem that the Bosnian stuff isn't there is that there is this the library that recognizes the emotion in it is not available for Bosnian as far as I know. But I mean, if you contacted CLIPS, C-I-C-L-I-P-S Institute in Belgium, the algorithm is open source. So I'm sure that you could feed it some restaurant reviews in Bosnian, and that it would, you know, could be adjusted without that much major effort. But like, not if you're one guy. Like if you're at a uni and if you're teaching Python, I think you'll be able to make that happen. At least the basic sentiment analysis library adaptation. Cool. Okay, guys. Let me know if this is a wrap. If you've got any more questions. One more from you. Any good books on Python? You know, I've learned everything I've learned from YouTube and online courses. So I've never, that's a confession, I've never really, there is one book and it's called Automate the Boring Stuff with Python. And that's the book that I used so I teach in school part-time. And I have to send out emails, and I got sick of, basically I got a Python program to parse through Excel files, find students' names, combine them into emails, and send them automated emails with logins and passwords and that. So yeah, that's a book I read, and it was pretty good. Are these chatbots usable into uni exams during the COVID pandemic? You could totally create a browser-based chatbot that could record the data. So you could begin by letting the student enter a username and password, and then you record their first-time responses. So yeah, totally possible. You would just need to change the settings inside REPL that the actual file is hidden, the file where the answers to the student are saved. What are packages and libraries for chatbots. Look, the easiest one to use is called TextBlob. So TextBlob is a collection of the easiest and best tools from like 5 different Python libraries. But the comprehensive one is, if you want to get serious about natural language processing, the comprehensive one is called NLTK. That's the, I'll put it in the chat, NLTK library. The other thing, maybe there's one other thing that I can mention. So this was one of 2 projects that I did for Digital Technologies Hub. The other one also used natural language processing in a more meaningful way, and that was book analysis. So basically you wrote Python programs that read a book and then print out a sentiment map of the book chapter by chapter. And print out the top characters, like, you know, in Harry Potter, like you figure out who's the hero, and then sort out between, using verbs and adjectives, sort out between the capitalized words that are people and capitalized words that are like places, perhaps a school or a city. So you could basically use the NLTK library, but I did all of that with TextBlob, by the way. You could use that to gain and parse a lot of meaning from large volumes of text. So like you could just literally enter a book as a text file from Project Gutenberg, and in 1 minute you're going to know who is the hero. Is the hero a positive character or a negative character, where the book takes place, and all of that. Is it important to learn object-oriented programming in Python? Look, yes and no. A lot of scientists are using Python, and they're using Python to store, manipulate, and visualize their data. And they use it together with something called Jupyter Notebook. So that's very much procedural programming, not at all object-oriented, right? And it's used at a professional level like that. But if you wanted to build any application that's larger, like if you're trying to write 1,000 lines in Python code, you cannot do it in any other way that isn't object-oriented. Otherwise, you're going to create a mess. Those are all the questions. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Guys, I'm going to sign off in a minute. It's dinner time here. What new developments are expected? Look, Python is the #1 programming language for prototyping. So as such, all of the like latest AI stuff, whether it's classifiers or like using AI to recognize faces and vision, all of that is currently in development more in Python than any other programming language. So a lot in the area of machine learning, a lot in the area of, you know, understanding of human language, processing text, as well as images. So there's also MicroPython, which is slowly gaining traction. And that, I would say, might actually be the most interesting one, because Python is really, really good at manipulating data. Lists and dictionaries, as well as the way the for loops work and the way you can save it to files. It's way, way easier than any other language that I've seen. And if you can like use if microcontrollers use Python and they all talk to each other over IoT, and the information that they share is manipulated in an easier way, as opposed to having to worry about, like they're done in some compiled C-based language, and your main server that's processing the data is done in something else. It's huge amounts of communication problems. I think that Python on microcontrollers can really streamline IoT and make it something that's a lot easier. This is something called a BBC microbit. It's a $25 microcontroller that has Wi-Fi communications. This one is actually a thermostat in my room. It's 19 degrees at the moment. And this has been running for about 3 weeks. So these 2 AAA batteries have been running this LED screen for weeks. These guys can talk to each other. They've got a bunch of built-in sensors, and they can plug into other sensors. And yeah, this blows me away. So I'm actually working on a number of webinars for a company called DF Robot that are going to use MicroPython. So there's that as well. Okay, guys. Puno hvala. Uživajte. Mi se možda vidimo na nekom sljedećem webinaru. Sačekat ću samo da potvrdim da nema još pitanja. Oh.